You're watching Soul Care 360 with Tim and Carlene Ingram. Welcome to the show. Today we have a very special guest that's with us. And as you can see, Tim is not here, but as I always say, he's building for our family. I have such a unique position today because I get to interview my daughter. And Soul Care 360 is so much more than us just talking to people outside of our family. It's so much more than trying to reach the masses because love starts at home. And today I have with me my second daughter. Her name is Adrienne, and she has agreed to join me today. And there is so much that she has to share. And I am going to allow her to introduce herself to you, and then we're going to get started. This is Soul Care 360, and we have an amazing show. And I want to take advantage of every second that we have.
Hello, my name is Adrienne, and as she's already stated, I am her daughter, her second daughter.
So, Adrienne, when I asked you to be on the show, how did that make you feel? And are you nervous right now?
I am a little nervous. When you asked me to be on the show, I was okay with it. I do know that I have a story to tell, and it's time to share.
Yeah. And you know, what is really phenomenal is that I have to be a part of your story. You know, whether it is good, bad, or indifferent, I had an impact in what you experience and what your story is. And so what I love about soul care and being able to be made whole and just the whole wellness journey, what I love about it is that you can stand in your truth, mm-hmm. and then you can be healed in that truth. You can speak to what actually happened, mm-hmm. how you perceived it to happen, how I or whomever that's involved in it saw it happening, mm-hmm. but you're able to be emotionally intelligent about it, meaning that it doesn't send you to a place of depression. It doesn't send you to a place of anger anymore because mm-hmm. you've actually dealt with it and continue to deal with it. So you are, how old are you?
I just turned 42 on the 2nd of May.
May 2nd was your birthday. Mm-hmm. I can just say, for being her mother, I could just say she has been a very different child from birth, literally from birth. And she probably don't want me to tell you, but I'm going to tell you anyway. So Adrienne was this child who I stayed in labor with for over 24 hours, and it was active, hard labor. And for whatever reason, Adrienne just did not want to come. She did not want to come. So finally, the obstetrician, he said, well, we have got to do a cesarean section. And so remember now, I'm in labor with her for over 24 hours, and it was active labor. And so they, got me ready for the surgery, and they were rolling me down to the surgical suite. And just as they were rolling me into the operating room, one of my arms went up, and then one of my legs went up, and then she started crowning. And I'm saying, this child. So she waited until she was ready to be born. And as I sit here today, I think about that process. When Adrienne was born, she did not utter a word. She was healthy, she was happy, I guess, but she did not utter a word. As a matter of fact, what she did was she had her thumb in her mouth, and she was laying, and I could see her, I was making eye contact with her, And it was just like you were saying, okay, I'm here, now what? And it's been that way ever since. She has definitely been she's different. She was a different child from the very beginning. And I think her difference has added to some of the experiences that she has had. And I'm sure that she would agree with that. Her being totally different did add to some of the traumas. So that's what we're going to start with. We're going to start with traumas, okay? Because that's actually why you're here today. You have overcome so much. You have taken control over your life, over some things that have really been very difficult for you. You've taken control over it. And so where you're sitting right now, in terms of not necessarily physically here, but where you're sitting right now, how do you feel about the decisions you've made and where you are? How do you feel about that?
Right now, I'm okay. I've accepted the decisions I made, the good ones, the bad ones. They all led me to where I am today, so I'm okay.
You're okay.
I'm okay.
All right, so when we talk about trauma, we know that trauma is like a bad experience, a severely impactful experience that we have had in our lives. So when I think about you, there are just so many words that come to my mind. And as I call these words out, I don't want you to say anything right then unless you definitely need to say something. But your whole story, I was there for it. And I'm going to throw these words out. Now, first, one of the things that I've learned and am learning, while I'm doing this talk show is you want to start with an origin. Okay, and so the origin of the story is she was born into a very dysfunctional home. Dysfunctional in the sense that I was very young. Dysfunctional in the sense that the father was not a good person. So she came into chaos. And so when you are born into chaos, unless there is a correction of that chaos, then all you have is step by step by step and a progression of some of the same, okay? So the first word I thought about when I was getting ready to talk with you today was abandon. Okay, so I said abandon, abandonment, huge. You don't have to say anything unless you want to, okay? So abandonment, fear, walking on eggshells, okay? I've got some more. Remaining quiet to keep peace. Denying your feelings and your emotions. Thoughts of suicide. Eating disorder. Anger. Rage. Molestation. Denials. Disobedience.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's talk about the disobedience before we get to the other. And the reason I want to start with the disobedience is because you were born a proper child. That's like, when I say a proper child, I mean you were actually chosen by God. God chose you. He gave you so many gifts when you came to this realm. And with that being said, there is such a level of intimacy you have had with God from the very beginning that most people don't have. And so the reason why I'm starting with disobedience is because of where you were in Him, where you are in Him, and how you came to this world in Him. So tell me about that disobedience. And you don't have to jump ahead. It doesn't have to be anything just really huge. It can just be something, that speaks to the progression of a pattern of disobedience?
Well, I'll start off here. Ever since I can remember, I've always known and felt that God loved me. And He would speak to me, most times through dreams, but there were times when He would speak to me audibly. Throughout my life, especially, well, I'm going to say this, especially when I was a teenager. You start dating or call yourself, liking people. And I remember God showing me in a dream the type of person that I was involved with. This first time, I heard what God was telling me in the dream, but I continued on with the relationship. And it didn't end well. So I was disobedient. It happened again with a different person. This time, the voice was audible.
Okay.
And although I did cut ties with a person, I ended up going back, so disobedient. And I suffered for many, many years because of that disobedience. God knows everything. Sometimes we think we know best, but we don't. God knows what is best for us. Another example of disobedience. Again, another relationship. I remember this time God told me in a dream, again, 3 times to cut ties with this particular person. I did. But then, again, I went back. Disobedience. And that decision to be disobedient almost killed me. I almost did not make it out of that relationship. I've heard throughout my life that obedience is better than sacrifice. It is. I just didn't pay any attention to it.
So when you say you almost didn't make it out of that relationship, talk to the audience about that.
The main thing, mentally, the experience was so traumatic that I began to have thoughts of suicide. I just could not continue to live in that situation. My Lord. Yeah, thoughts of suicide. And more than once. There was one particular time that I had everything planned out. I said, okay, Lord, forgive me, but I cannot handle this. I know you warned me. I went on ahead and did my own thing. And now the burden is just too heavy. I just can't take it anymore. So that particular day, I had decided that I was going to end it because I wanted to just be done. So I had everything planned out. I was sitting on my couch, and then came a knock at my door. God sent my brother to my door. And he saved my life. He had no clue. Nobody knew that I was that depressed.
Yeah.
That I was lonely.
Yeah.
I felt misunderstood. I felt unheard, unappreciated. It was a mess.
Yeah. You know, you said no one really knew the depth.
Mm-hmm.
As a mother, I knew some. I knew you had been isolated on purpose.
Right.
I knew that you were, you kept things to yourself. You bottled it up. you would not allow me in but so far. And I think a part of that was sort of a misaligned loyalty to the institution of a marriage, and thinking that I'm going to make sure that the appearance is as good as it can possibly be.
Yeah.
And so we learn all of those toxic sort of thought processes as we are growing up in our lives, and we look at the patterns that our families, our parents have. We look at the patterns of other people, and we hear God's word being taken out of context, released out of context. And then you find yourself boxed in, and then you find yourself feeling guilty, and you find yourself feeling that if I share, if I tell, someone is going to say, see, I told you. Was that ever a thought, see, I told you not to do that?
No.
Okay.
That was never a thought. My thinking was, God told me not to do this. I did it anyway. You know, this is the results of my disobedience. Right. And I actually began to feel the effects of the disobedience 3 months in. Yes, 3 months in. But I figured, okay, Lord, forgive me. I didn't listen. I put myself in this position. I'm here now. I'm just going to try to work through it. But each day, each month, each year, it became worse and too heavy to bear. It became heavier and heavier to bear. And so much so until, again, I began to
find a way out.
Yeah, find a way out.
Yeah, got to get out of this.
At first, I would think, okay, well, I'm going to stay in it, and whomever passes away first, then, you know.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
Been there.
Right. Yeah. It was a lot.
Okay. All right. So you have described to me, because I have, like firsthand experience of knowing God is saying no. I mean, it is not a maybe God is saying no. It is a real no. However, being disobedient, I went ahead anyway, right? So I have firsthand knowledge of what that feels like. Okay. And so when you're in it, you said like 3 months in, you knew, oops.
3 months in.
So God is saying to me, don't. I'm proceeding anyway down this road, and he's saying don't. The Holy Spirit is saying don't. And I knew I was in disobedience, and in my disobedience, my thinking was, okay, but I won't, I won't let you down another time, God. So, I'm going to just go ahead and take care of this so you won't, be let down by me anymore, because we were living together. And, that's like in the church, the ultimate sin. And so I felt like if I just go ahead on and make it legal, then I'll be okay. I knew I was going to pay for that decision. I just didn't know it would be the next day. You had 3 months. It was the next day that the noose just tightened around my neck. So, all right. So the disobedience, that was just sort of throughout all of, our lives. I mean, it's just what we do as human beings. Okay. But what I want us to be able to do is, even when we are in, those moments of disobedience, that we can be healthy in it. Okay, so you're through that now. You've gotten over that now. So, the origin of disobedience, though, in terms of you wanting someone, you wanting to be in the institution of marriage, making this dogged decision that I'm going to make it work no matter what. Let's go back to abandonment.
My Lord. Okay. I remember being a very little girl, 6, 7. And I remember we lived with my grandparents. And my father would sometimes call, sometimes stop by. And one particular time he said, I'm going to come and take you all to a birthday party. So, because of his track record, normally I didn't believe him. But this particular time, I did. So I was excited. We prepared. We were sitting and waiting. And hours and hours went by. The more time went by, the angrier I got.
How old were you?
7, 6. And I remember in that moment, or during that time, I remember sitting there, and in that moment, my heart hardened.
Jesus.
And I promised myself, I said, and I was crying. I wasn't one that would cry in front of people.
That's true.
But I cried sitting on the couch that day. And I said, no one else, not another man, will ever have me sitting and waiting on him, and he never show up. And I made that promise to myself, and I kept it. The abandonment, the anger that I felt, it had a huge impact on the type of men that I ended up choosing. Yeah. To be in romantic relationships with. Although I tried my best not to choose men that were similar to my father, I ended up doing it anyway. And it was devastating. It was very devastating. Very.
What I remember about you, you guys telling me, for those of you who don't know, 3 daughters, and they're like 2 years apart, and they're all sitting on the couch just waiting and waiting. You said something that I've never heard you express before. You said in that moment, your heart hardened. That's the first time I've heard you say that. You've always said, that I made that decision at that moment. I wasn't going to wait, but the expression of him not showing up, what that did to you that day. That's why it's so important that we not play with our responsibilities as parents. It's so important. And when I say play with, we need to be able to understand what parenting really is. And I did the best that I could. My parents did the best that they could, and I'm sure their parents did the best that they could. But I would say, as you see that you are in error, as you see that you're not healthy, and the environment that your children are in is not healthy, do something about it. We're here now, and we have horror stories about our lives. And I would like to just say to you guys, if you know that you're living in dysfunction, if you know that you don't have the skills and the tools that you need to be a good parent, or to be a good daughter, or a good wife or husband, or whatever the case may be, think about this. You're not only impacting yourself, it's not only keeping you in a space of horror and a space of anxiety and chaos in your mind, but everyone around you is impacted by your decision to remain in dysfunction. And so I want to encourage you to make steps to walk out of dysfunction, because it really is, it's obtainable. And it's a beautiful thing when you do. And I always say it's not one and done. This is a journey. It's not one and done. You and I both are on healing journeys. And we
Yes.
will be on healing journeys, I believe, until, we're no longer here because we're human beings.
I
And,
agree.
but the thing about being on the healing journey is when you have overcome and when you have dealt with those things and you can help someone else, then something else crops up, you deal with that and you just keep walking. All right, so abandonment, okay? Suicidal thoughts, we talked about all of that. Let's dive into walking on eggshells. Because that's a biggie. That was a biggie for you. Tell me why.
Trying to keep the peace. I was so focused on trying to keep the peace in the home that I wasn't experiencing peace within myself. Yes, that's what it was.
Okay. And so, did you see me walking on eggshells?
I did.
Did you see my mother walking on eggshells?
I did. And everything that I said I would not do, I ended up doing. Yes.
Okay. All right. So the eggshells, the people pleasing, and the abandonment. Tell me about the rage. Talk to me about the rage and what rage did to you. Now, see, there's a difference in anger and rage.
The rage goes back to the moment that I was on the couch waiting on my father. That is when the rage sprung up. I was already sad that we were living with our grandparents.
Right.
I know you were away at school and all of that.
Well, talk about that a little bit. Talk about that. How did that make you feel? Because you guys have shared some things with me that broke my heart. It broke my heart, irrespective of why I was absent. It impacted you guys in such a negative way.
Oh, my Lord.
It's okay. Gather yourself.
I remember just wanting to be with my mother. I already knew that, my father was kind of in and out, but a part of me felt like, okay, well, I can depend on my mom to be there. But then we ended up living and moving in with our grandparents. And while there, I would be so sad that I would go hide and cry. And my grandparents were wonderful. They were wonderful to us, to me. My experience was wonderful when it came to them. But there were other people in the home that mistreated me. Mistreated us, but I'm going to tell my part.
Yes.
Mistreated us. And made me feel like I wasn't wanted. Even though my grandmother, my grandparents, they did everything that they could to comfort us, especially my grandmother. She would always say that she loved us and hug us and give us sugar on the jaw. But it wasn't enough because I wanted the presence of my mother. And for many years, that added to the amount of rage. That watered the rage that had already sprung up. It fed it.
That's beautiful. Don't forget what you're saying. It's beautiful. There's a fly. It's beautiful in that how you described it. it watered it.
Mm-hmm.
My absence
It
watered
did.
it. And that wasn't a beautiful thing, but just how she was able to express it is what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah, it watered it. It made me hate people because the two people that I opened my heart up to, they broke it. Whether it was intentional or not, my heart was broken as a child. And I would get so mad and I would be so angry that my head would hurt. Excuse me.
It's okay.
Yeah. My head would hurt, my stomach would hurt all the time. And excuse me. After those episodes, I would once again remind myself, you're not going to let anybody hurt you to this degree ever again. And I began to hate people. Hate people. I didn't want to be bothered with people. The hugs that my grandmother would give me, I began to not want them.
Wow.
I didn't want anybody to touch me at all. And for years, I did not allow people to hug me because of the rage and the hatred that had built up in my heart. And of course, and because of being molested. I didn't want anybody to touch me. And I want to say when I was maybe about 13, 14, there was a lady in my church. Her name was Sister Maddie, beautiful woman. Sister Maddie Duncan. She went to hug me, and I clenched up. And she told me, she said, it's not natural for you to not want human touch.
Yeah.
And she said, I'm going to hug you until you begin to like it. And so for years, she was the only person that I let hug me. Even when I began to date, it was, you know, you know, you can hug me a little bit, but not for real.
Right. Right. So you had lots of walls up. And you know that is that's understandable because you had just been hurt.